So, hello guys. I will be playing this clip from Subway Surfers on the background while I keep my talk, so I can treat the TikTok ADHD mind. You know, I hope it makes you focus a little bit. And this will be basically my first scaling guide, or I wouldn't necessarily call it scaling guide. I think it's more akin to how to understand SCD better, how to be a better scaler and a debater, both of them, just how to be better objectively at scaling your favorite character, right? First of all, I would like to show my gratitude for the poll. About like 90% of the people wanted me to do these tutorials, which quite surprised me actually. I expected most people to actually do uh, or actually want these tutorials as well, but I didn't really think that it would be at such a massive number. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Also, if there are any editors that want to make subtitles for me for these videos, you can reach out to me on Discord. I think I'm pretty publicly known on Discord. So yeah, and contribute to a good course. That means nurturing the skills of people in SCD. Of course, you will not be paid because I'm poor. So sorry for that. But yeah, if you're interested in just making subtitles on this video about what I'm saying, that would be pretty cool. If somebody were to reach out to me. So yeah, that's that. And actually, the first part about the scaling guide will be about scaling systems. And I know this is a very controversial topic to actually start from, but I think this needs to be addressed first. Because I think that scaling systems are the very core of SCD, if what it encompasses the ideology of a lot of debaters and scalers, and I would like to share my insights here. I think it got a lot better. Nowadays, I don't think many people care about scaling systems at all, or at least the best scalers in this community, best debaters, which is good. I'm also of the opinion that scaling systems are completely irrelevant to SCD. There are a lot of different scaling systems, of course. There's normal scaling, there's stop scaling, there's methodology, there's proven ability, all these types of scaling. But we need to ask ourselves if they are actually really useful, if they somehow help us to SCD, if they are introducing something that we don't already know. And the answer to that question is just no. It doesn't introduce anything anything new, anything of the sort that we could use in SCD, which I think is something a lot of people just don't realize. They just don't get it. If we look at how scaling systems really work, they just all boil down to simple logic, simple philosophy, simple logic within philosophy. There's nothing more that scaling systems really truly are. There are just different scaling systems because a lot of people disagree with, for example, how should Sora be scaled, how should Ayanokochi be scaled, how should Light be scaled, and they try to make up arbitrary scaling systems that basically help them scale these characters appropriately, right? I think this is very bad for the community. It gives a sense of urgency, it gives a sense of bias, and I think that's pretty bad considering the fact that scaling systems really don't contribute to anything. They all boil down to just simple logic. For example, if we look at the scaling systems in power scaling, right? There's CCAP and other different scaling systems, versus Battle Wiki. These exist for a reason, okay? They exist for a reason, but the scaling systems in SCD don't. They exist completely arbitrary. Let me explain the difference. I think this is what a lot of people in SCD don't realize. They just make up systems because okay, it's in power scaling as well. Let me be cool. Okay, so we need to have all these like 10 different scaling systems, and we can all choose from. Scaling is subjective. All these different shits that people are saying. It's complete nonsense. Okay. We are scaling. Scaling is a metric. Scaling is a metric of logic. We use logic to scale, okay? So there needs to be some kind of an objective evaluation of the feats we are talking about. And of course, there's a problem with the induction, problem of abduction. Nothing is necessarily 100%, but we are not talking about 100% case, okay? If a feat has, for example, 60% of it being likely, assigning some arbitrary number there, then the feed is valid according to the community. That's how we scale. That's how we just scale SCD. Okay, it doesn't need to be deductive in order for the feed to be valid. That's first thing to note. With that in mind, scaling becomes completely objective. Okay, once you know everything about two characters that you scale, scaling becomes objective. Okay, of course, people have biases. People lack knowledge on certain characters. This is what makes scaling subjective for them. But in essence, if everybody were to strip themselves off of the biases, if everybody was omniscient, okay, if everybody knew everything about every character, scaling becomes objective. And this is very important, because what this means is that it means that we can evaluate the characters objectively if we have the proper knowledge. Okay, this is very, very important to notice. And back to my power scaling point, and how do these systems actually work? So there are different kinds of systems in power scaling, and why they don't disagree on the fundamentals. Okay, they think a defeat that they are using comparatively, the feed is the same essentially. They use the same tools to validate the feed, same terms of impressiveness about the feed, but what they disagree on is the cosmology behind it. For example, if a certain feed scales to hyperversal or multiversal, okay, these things they disagree on. So, for example, scaling systems in SCD could be applied, for example, if we scaled off of the same metric system as power scales do. For example, if we try to somehow incorporate, for example, genius, above genius, extraordinary genius, animalistic, average human, this kind of metric system that you can sometimes see on YouTube videos. This is when a metric system could actually help. And what I mean by metric system is a scaling system. This is when it is appropriate to actually use a specific scaling system. But none of these scaling systems in SCD actually fulfill the job, because they are made for the sake of scaling itself, which is why it is flawed. Okay? So you cannot even use any scaling system to determine this, because first of all, it's not a popular concept in SCD to scale like this, and second of all the scaling systems refer to how we should scale. It gives prescriptive claims about how we should scale, how we should treat characters, and it generalizes everything. Okay, and this is very, very bad. I had this discussion with Ace. He is a very prominent code scaler. He's very good. I would say he's top 3 in code, in debating and scaling. He's a really smart guy. Okay, so no hate towards him. I actually didn't ask for permission about this, so I hope you don't mind me including this in the video. But we had a talk about PA, proven ability, and if it's even good, if people should scale by proven ability. And we had like 3 to 4 back and forth, and within 3 to 4 back and forth, I basically got Ace to admit that PA is all about logic, And if PA is all about logic, how can you even call it a SCD scaling system if it's just logic? Logic was there always. In everything you do, everything that you do, even daily decisions, you go to, for example, get a cup of water, okay? This is based on logic. That you are feeling thirsty, therefore you are going to get a cup of water. Okay, this is a logical decision. And if you are basing this decision, if you should somehow make a metric system, a scaling system about what it means to actually get water, that's kind of weird, isn't it? Right? So the metric system is already there, and it's called philosophy. It's called logic in philosophy, and that's the only metric system that we use in SCD universally. There are disagreements about how we should apply logic, okay? But this is nothing that we cannot solve through reason, empirical evidence, and just simple logic, okay? So it's not something unsolvable. That's what we are already doing when scaling SCD. And this is something that applies to all scaling systems. If it applies to all scaling systems, that means it ultimately just boils down to logic once again. So really, what these scaling systems really do is they really just use logic when scaling, and that is all they are doing. They are doing nothing more, nothing less. Okay, Ace admitted that himself, that if using logic is what makes a proven ability scalar a proven ability scalar, then he scales away proven ability, essentially conceding to the fact that all he uses is logic when scaling. There are no different means other than logic by which we scale SCD, okay? All scaling systems are universally completely useless, complete garbage. And I really encourage people to stop using them, to stop restricting themselves to a single scaling system, a single scaling method. And why? Because SCD is relative. Okay, you cannot just restrict your own scaling system, your entire enterprise of SCD into one scaling system. It's very relative, it's very context dependent, versatile. Okay, this is what SCD really is. This is what it means to scale SCD. Let me give you an example. Imagine we have two characters, okay, and they both have the same feet. This is a hypothetical situation, okay? They both have the same feet, they both have the same proof for the feet, but one of the feet is valid and the other one isn't. Well, why is the case? Why is that the case? Okay, why is that the case? Really, this is a genuine question. And I don't mean this as a joke. One of them is actually valid and one of them is actually not valid. It's invalid, okay? Why? Because the capabilities of the characters just differ, okay? If you make an interpretation about character X and his feats, his prior feats basically correspond to this feat that we are comparing, essentially, then we could take it as valid because it's narratively consistent with his character and with his previous feats, okay? But if, for example, if there is a character Y that whose best feat is learning a vocabulary, okay? Hypothetical situation, of course. And then they just come up with some 30 contingency layer plan, whatever, some insane bullshit, right? It's way less likely that this feed is actually valid, and there are some loopholes within the feed that make it invalid despite there being a plausible evidence for it. Okay, so this is what separates it. And if there is something, if there's an identical situation, completely identical situation, but the characters themselves are just different, then we cannot universalize scaling because all characters are different, okay? We would need to make an exception to every scaling system about every character, because every character is different. Every character has different statements, different narrative implications, different setting within a verse. All of this makes the scaling of characters relative, okay? So it's really impossible to just confine ourselves within a singular scaling system. I will actually talk more complex here. All of this is caused by a little tool called Bayes' theorem, okay? It is basically used to develop a cumulative case where you have multiple lines of evidence supporting a proposition. Proposition is basically a statement that can be either true and false, okay? The posterior probability of hypothesis A, okay, this is the first example that I've given the available evidence B is equal to the prior probability given to the background information of the hypothesis being true, expressed as a ratio, okay? All of this is then multiplied by the ratio of the evidence given the hypothesis against the probability of the evidence given that antithesis. It is a probabilistic tool, essentially, okay? Given enough evidence through this logic, you can establish any explanation as true, no matter how supernatural it is. Though you actually need to have superb evidence, then that differs on case-to-case basis, even if we assume that the characters actually have the same feat, and okay, and the same verse even, for example, okay? This is what separates it, okay? This is very important. And to put this into some kind of layman terms, Bayes' theorem is basically a theorem that supports, for example, Occam's razor and Sagan's standard. You can Google these two concepts. I will not really explain them. I don't want to make this video unnecessarily long, but it supports these two statements, okay? It means that any evidence is provable as long as there is sufficient evidence for it. If there is not sufficient evidence, be it empirical evidence or logical, rational evidence, it should count as insufficient, okay? And this is so drastically volatile, so drastically relative in SCD that we cannot really even label anything within one singular scaling systems. Within one singular scaling system, it's all so hard to confine. Okay, and this is why I think that SCD scaling systems shouldn't be used at all in SCD. Of course, if you have any disagreements about this, we can discuss it on Discord. My nick is Riiruuism, okay, with two basically REERUU-ism, okay. But I assume many of you already know my Discord, so yeah. And this was the first part of the scaling or scaling guide. How to be better in SCD, how to understand it more, okay. And this will help you both in scaling, both in debating, both in basically public image of you as a person. You will just appear smart, okay, if you abide by these principles. Just trust me. And there's actually one more thing I want to mention, and that it is a very good thing that a lot of good scalers are already aware of this problem with scaling systems. For example, Saj, Loy, or Zenith. Basically, if I were to name some, they're already all aware that scaling systems are basically bullshit. It's unfortunate that we came to this conclusion a little bit late, but that's why I'm making this video first and foremost before I delve into the categories, how to actually debate, how to actually scale. I think this needs to be settled first, so there is not some yapper in the comment section saying, "Oh, but I scaled by stop scaling, therefore it's invalid." Okay, this is not what we are aiming for here. Okay, scaling systems are useless, and so I will not abide by any principle of any scaling here. I will go off of purely philosophical logic, okay? Because this is basically all every system boils down to in SCD. It is nothing new. It is already here for thousands of years. Nothing new, okay, guys? Well, next scaling guide on Friday. Till then, take care.